good evening. Um, this is Dick Black, Senator Dick Black, and today I'm going to be recording. I'm pre-recording this to show in the morning. Our co-host Morgan Blythe is not going to be with me tonight. She's in the background though, and I really appreciate her helping out. So let me just get into it. We're just going to talk about one topic today. There's always plenty of news taking place, but I want to focus on this one thing. And the question is, should abortion pills be lawful as the population of the globe implodes? And what got me interested in this, there was an opinion piece that came out in the New York Times, and it was entitled, "The Population Bust is Coming Sooner Than Anyone is Prepared For." So the article touched on a number of things. It said that the American fertility rate has fallen below 1.6 children per woman, a record low. And it said that the replacement rate, and anyone involved in studying population realizes the level at which a population sustains itself, neither increasing nor decreasing, is about 2.1 childbirths per woman. And we are well below that, substantially below. 2.1 keeps you even. 1.6 means that your population is not sustaining itself. So if the current trend continues, and this is a long-term downward trajectory, if it continues, U.S. population stops growing in the 2030s and begins to decline. Now, what's important is this is not just an American phenomenon. The birth rates are collapsing across the entire world, not just here at home. And the supply of would-be migrants is shrinking as more and more countries run out of young people to export. Now, birth rates have fallen almost continually for the past 20 years. And interestingly, there is only a single state in the Union, South Dakota, that still has a birth rate that's near the level that will keep its population steady on its own without in-migration. Now, it's certainly no secret that the world's facing an unprecedented demographic downturn. In the U.S., we are, as I mentioned, at a record low, and we continue to decline. Now, in 1970, when my wife first gave birth to our daughter Michelle, the median age for first-time births was 22.1 years old. So on average, obviously some are younger, some are older, but the average age of people, of women giving birth in 1970 was 22.1 years old. Now today, first-time mothers in the United States average almost 28 years old, which is an all-time high for first-time childbirth. Now, the importance of this is that women's peak fertility runs from about 18 years of age to 24 years. During that time, I often joke that, a woman's husband can look at her and she becomes pregnant. It just, it's very, very easy for a woman to become pregnant at that age. However, most women no longer have their children during this period of peak fertility in the United States and, in fact, around the world. Now, women's fertility, while it's at a peak from 18 to 24 years of age, it is still strong. Women are still very fertile until age 35, when there is a marked decline in fertility, and it begins to diminish greatly at that point. Now, this is important because if you look at the later age at which women are beginning to have their first children, it's changed by there's almost a period of 6 years that's been erased from the time in which a woman could have children. And most women, most girls their girls are not taught in school, and women are not really that culturally aware of the fact that the time of fertility, the time of childbirth, is a rather narrow part of a woman's life. Now, because of the fact that women now are 27 to 28 years old when they have their first children, that means that window of active fertility is now down to the time from about age 27 to age 35. That's not very long. That's an 8-year span of time in which to have whatever children a woman is likely to have. Now, of course, this is just an average. Some girls will give birth in their very early teens. And in fact, there are even cases of women, or not women, but girls, as young as 9 years old. But those are obviously, exceptional. And there are women, we have a dear friend who gave birth to a very handsome, bright Naval Academy graduate when she was 45 years of age. But for most women, the active childbearing years are very fleeting, and they're going to run somewhere between that 27 and 35 years of age. Now, because of that, any serious effort to increase fertility has got to seek to expand the length of time for fertility, and to encourage earlier marriages and faster pregnancies. We've made a tremendous cultural mistake in the United States by enacting these laws that make it more and more difficult for teenage girls to get married. Now, most states, for the bulk of this country's existence, allowed teenage marriages with the parents' permission, because obviously you have situations where the family would not want to have a girl if she's not sufficiently mature, or if the fellow is not what they would prefer to have. The parents would have some control. But I was present in the Virginia Senate when we enacted a law that raised the minimum age for marriage to 18 and took away the ability of parents to give permission. I thought it was a great mistake. I argued against it, but we've just fallen into this thing that, well, you need to put off childbearing as long as you can, not realizing most people do not realize that as you take away those early years for childbirth, it becomes more and more difficult to have children at all. And a lot of times, we convince young women that they should first go to college. Well, all of a sudden you've blocked out another 4 years of time. So you've already cut this thing down to a span of 8 years. Now you've cut it in half by saying finish college. And then we say, well, no, go ahead and, you need to really start a career. It's going to take you a couple of years to start a career. So now we've gone down to where we're about 2 years span. And unfortunately, when you're in the workplace, it's much more difficult to find someone to marry. And so you often, and I've been through this with friends of our family who, all of a sudden they have this desperate urge to beat the clock and to have children, but you got to have a husband. And all of a sudden you discover that, unlike when you're in high school or maybe early years of college, it's just hard. You don't have that same sort of relationship. A lot of times people are prohibited from having any sort of romantic relationship on the job. And so it makes it very difficult to find someone. So we're closing the door on the age of fertility, and it's very dangerous for us culturally, and so this is a problem. Now, in past generations, going back to oh my goodness, I guess back into the 70s maybe. We had this battle against overpopulation, and we were being warned that somehow there'd be too many people and everybody would be starving because they couldn't feed themselves, and all of the planet, Mother Earth's goodies would disappear, and it would be terrible. There was a fellow who wrote a very famous book called The Population Bomb. Paul Ehrlich was his name, and he taught that we had this risk of overpopulation, and that there would be an environmental collapse because it just couldn't survive. So he promoted contraception and abortion, and considered them very vital tools to rescue Mother Earth, or whatever he called it at the time. But that was then, and the groups like Zero Population Group, Planned Parenthood, all of these other abortion groups were very successful in convincing women to terminate their pregnancies, to get rid of the children, and now we find that as this has taken hold with a tremendous grip, that it failed. It was a false premise, and overpopulation was not a problem. But the reverse is a problem today. So in these days, modern economists, demographers, and heads of state, presidents, kings, and so forth, are sounding a very genuine alarm over a global fertility crisis. And the widespread decline in childbirth threatens the workforce. It diminishes innovation, and also a certain childbirth rate, fertility rate, is necessary to maintain the welfare state. We rely a great deal on Social Security in the United States, for example. And Social Security is premised on the basis that there will be a certain number of people to support a certain number of other people. But as the population shifts and that presumption is no longer valid, then you find that there are not enough young people to support the old people, And then you have to confront with how do you deal with that? So we now have major financial institutions publishing reports that detail a demographic winter that is taking hold. And there's a very real financial concern that economic growth may stagnate permanently as we lose the ability to replace ourselves. In the Constitution we talked about we and our posterity. Well, back in those days, there was at the founding of the country, we understood that this was not about us. This was about us and our posterity, those who follow on. And if you don't have people who follow on, then what's the use of anything that you accomplish? Now, let me just give you some specific examples to illustrate how acute this crisis has become. We've got a number of dying cultures, and top among them right now is South Korea. They have the world's lowest fertility rate at 0.72 per woman, which is far below 2.1. And it has left the population of Korea extremely fragile. It is on a decline that is very dramatic, and it appears that the country will simply evaporate over the next 2 or 3 generations. Now, they've invested $200 billion on incentives like giving bonuses for having children, subsidizing housing, fertility treatments. And nonetheless, in Korea, schools are closing everywhere because of the shortage of children. When I was in Vietnam, I used to fly Korean Marines into battle, and they were tough, hard troops. They were some of the finest troops on earth. Korea helped the United States in the Korean War, and they sent 500,000 of their troops, very fine troops, to fight with us in Vietnam. Today, they face very severe recruitment shortages. There are just not enough people to fill the ranks. The next one I'll mention is Japan. Japan has long been a dying nation. Deaths outpace births by hundreds of thousands every year. And it's really tragic that adult diapers now outsell baby diapers by a large margin. And that's really very tragic. Italy is another example, and this applies to Italy and Southern Europe. Italy was once known for its large families. The Catholic Church, which is in Vatican City in Rome, Catholic Church always encouraged large families. This went back to the time of the apostles, and Christianity flourished because in areas in Rome, actually, when the early Christians were there and they were being fed to the lions and so forth, they would go out at night, and the wealthy Romans had a way of disposing of children by just taking them out to certain discrete places and just leaving them for the animals to prey on. And the Christians would go out because they were pro-life, and they would go out after dark, and they would search, and they would discover these children who had been abandoned, and the Christians would take them in. So not only were the Christians very fertile themselves, but they recovered these children of the Roman elite, and they raised them, which caused an explosion of the Christian population. Now that was then, and now is now. The Catholic Church from the very, very earliest, from the time of the apostles, it always encouraged a high rate of fertility. But today, Italy's towns are depopulating. They have a dismal fertility rate of about 1.14. There are some 70 towns in Italy that sell vacant homes for €1 a piece. Now that you have to agree to invest money in renovating the abandoned homes. But nonetheless, the home itself is essentially given away to you if you'll just come in and occupy it and do some improvements to make it livable. So it is interesting that the Catholic Church, which for almost 2,000 years preached a very consistent and strong message of pro-life and pro-family, has gradually, under the last two popes, drifted away from its traditional emphasis on moral issues, marriage and the family, to where now they're embracing this sort of vague, trendy notion of social justice, whatever you define that to be. And so this is a time when we most need the power and influence of the Christian churches to encourage childbirth and large families and young families, and yet to too great an extent the churches are AWOL. They're absent from the battlefield. Now, the next example is China, and those who have been around a little bit, like I have, recall the time when under Mao Zedong and his recent successors, they had a very harsh and very brutal one-child policy that was enforced by literally bursting into people's homes. If they found you with more than one child, they would take one of the kids away and drown it. But this is not modern China. This was the China before. And I always urge people to distinguish between some of the terrible things in the past and the more enlightened things today in China. Now they have a 3-child policy. Now, why in heaven's name they would not just have an unlimited policy, but as a practical matter, even if a family has more than 3 children, they really don't enforce the 3-child limit. Why it's still on the books is beyond human comprehension. But nonetheless, China's population has shrunk over the past 4 years, and their current fertility rate is a very dangerous 0.97 children per woman. Now, at that rate, at a 0.97, the Chinese population will simply evaporate over coming generations. In 2025, China lost 3.4 million people. In other words, their total population dropped by 3.4 million. And so Chinese are dying faster than they're reproducing. And more importantly, they're dying at an accelerating rate. So the rapid aging in China threatens to leave generations where so many of the families had only one child. And so now you have those only children responsible for caring for a swelling number of elderly grandparents. So this is sort of the framework that we have. Now, I want to shift to one very practical problem that we have right here in the United States, and this affects other places in the world, but here it's a very precise issue because we have these abortion pills, and we're headed towards a constitutional showdown over what are called abortion shield laws. Now, right now, since Roe versus Wade was overturned, when Roe versus Wade was overturned, the Supreme Court returned the authority for abortion laws back to the states. Now, that seemed like it was going to be very workable, but it has not succeeded. And in fact, I suspect we have far more abortions today than we did before Roe versus Wade was overturned. Because what's happened is that in those states, particularly, well, for the most part, Democrat states, where they are passing these abortion amendments to the Constitution, and they're passing laws to encourage abortions. They also have set up these telemedicine operations that allow people in the states that prohibit abortion. Those people, those girls and women, can just call up and they can get online with somebody in New York or somebody in California, and they do a quickie telemedicine thing, and they explain why they need to have an abortion, and they reliably provide abortion pills that the girls and the women can take and kill the children before they are born, right in the convenience of their own home. Today, over 100,000 women and girls every year receive abortion pills from states that shield their providers from any sort of prosecution for distributing this stuff. And so, you know, as you might expect, states that ban abortion are very anxious to stop this mail order situation where their criminal laws can be bypassed by another state simply allowing somebody to use the United States mail to send illegal substances through the mail. Now, this is a very big deal because developed nations around the world, like the United States, are rapidly becoming infertile. And so you have this narrow window of fertility. And during that time, anytime during a 9-month pregnancy, somebody can convince a woman to say, hey, you know what? Oh my gosh, you're going to have so many headaches or whatever. Just go ahead, get rid of the baby. And say, yeah, hey, I can get you online right now. And they link them up, and the next thing, there's some pills that come, and they've killed the child. And so it's a very big thing. Now, with all of this going on, the populations of these infertile nations don't immediately decline. They begin to age, they lose their energy and productivity. Eventually, they have to import more and more migrants to make up shortfalls in their native population. And what happens is their national cohesion disintegrates as waves of arriving migrants come in with very dramatically different cultures, work habits, moral values, and there are cultural frictions that occur. If you look at Europe, Europe has many of these ancient cathedrals. I think the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris went back, I don't know whether it was 800 years, but it was a long time. And with the influx of Muslim migrants, fire broke out, burned down the entire church that had taken hundreds of years to build, and just took one night for culturally antagonistic people to burn it down. And this has been happening across Europe. Now, just recently, we have Mayor Mamdani in New York City, and he has a very heavily Muslim administration. And just recently, they had a kind of a grand church. It was a black church, and I think it went back I don't know what, a couple of hundred years or so that it had been there and served the population. And all of a sudden, it burned. It didn't burn 100 years ago. It didn't burn 200 years ago. It burned when we had our first Muslim administration in New York City. It was intentionally burned. We know that. We don't know exactly who did it, but at the same time, you can wonder whether it wasn't the same type of thing as we see sweeping Europe these days. So my point is that you have these cultural and religious conflicts, and there tends to be a cultural disintegration because some of these differences are rather intractable. Now, many nations face these declining birth rates, and they try to develop economic incentives. There's very little evidence to support the idea that those programs are successful. And so any country that intends to be very serious about turning around its demographic decline has got to begin by looking at the obvious low-hanging fruit. And one of the most obvious targets is the easy availability of drugs that are designed to kill healthy, well-developed babies at almost every stage of pregnancy. And the chief among these drugs is the toxic brew of two drugs. One is mifepristone, a poison designed to block a child's access to vital pregnancy hormones. And then the second one, and these two drugs go hand in hand, the other one is misoprostol, which induces labor to expel and suffocate the weakened child, because early on, the child does not have lungs that are sufficient to survive. Now, some of the later abortions, children do survive them, and then often you have doctors who are willing to go ahead and do the final killing of the child after it's born. But this brew of two drugs, mifepristone and misoprostol, in my view, are responsible for a significant, very significant portion of the worldwide collapse of fertility. Now, the drugs were introduced for the express purpose of destroying global fertility. And today they exterminate human life on a scale that really is comparable to that of thermonuclear war. That's much slower, of course, but just as consequential over time. In 1952, the Population Council was founded by John D. Rockefeller III. It had an explicit mission of addressing perceived global overpopulation, much like Paul Ehrlich's zero population growth. The Population Council played a central role in advancing medication abortion. Population Council brought mifepristone to the United States. They conducted clinical trials and they applied for FDA approval, which was granted by President Bill Clinton's administration in 2000. So I think you can thank the Clinton administration for the role that it played in the tremendous decline that we see today in fertility across the globe. Now, another key anti-fertility organization is DKT International. It was named after D.K. Tyagi, an early pioneer of India's population control program. DKT is a major global social marketing entity. Critics assert that DKT bypasses national restrictions and they run a vast supply chain distributing tens of millions of boxes of mifepristone and misoprostol across more than 100 countries to integrate abortion into foreign healthcare systems. Now, DKT uses its U.S. affiliate, Carafem, to prescribe abortion pills via telecare. Carafem prescribes abortion pills once a girl or woman makes a video visit online, and they ask a few questions, and then they mail them the pills that are then used to kill the baby that's developing in the womb. Now, when the U.S. Supreme Court overruled Roe versus Wade in 2022, the case was Dobbs versus Jackson, returned authority to states to regulate and to ban abortion if they wanted to within their borders. Well, since this practice developed, the practice of telemedicine was not developed at the time of that decision, but since then has very rapidly been growing and expanding across the country. And one of the biggest uses of it is to be able to legally prescribe the abortion drugs. Now, there's this tremendous conflict now between the pro-life states and the pro-abortion states. And there is a case out of the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals that sets up this clash between the pro-life states and the pro-abortion states. The Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals blocked the Food and Drug Administration rules. FDA has rules that allow the remote prescribing and the mail delivery of these abortion pills. And unfortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court issued an indefinite stay that has paused the injunction on this process. So consequently, as of today, it is possible for these telehealth outfits to use the mail, use the U.S. mail to penetrate the borders of pro-life states and to distribute these child-killing drugs. Now, the case still goes on. It's Louisiana versus FDA. So it is still possible that the U.S. Supreme Court could rule against this process. And I think for reasons I'll discuss, they should do that. Now, this is literally the frontier of abortion litigation in the United States. And there is an opportunity for the Trump administration to put its full weight in support of ending the process of mail order abortion drugs. Now, there is a very strong argument that they should do just that. In 1873, the United States federal government enacted the Comstock Act. And this states that every article or thing designed, adapted, or intended for producing abortion is declared to be non-mailable matter. And there are criminal penalties under 18 U.S. Code 1461 for anyone who knowingly uses the mail to transport these items. And it's been pointed out by Supreme Court Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito that the Comstock Act provides a clear federal restriction on the transit of these drugs. So conservative states are arguing that because federal law strictly bans mailing abortion pills, the FDA's mail order rules are invalid, and that no state law can legalize a practice that a federal criminal statute expressly forbids. I honestly don't understand how the U.S. Supreme Court could rule otherwise, because it is quite clear that these particular drugs are designed, adapted, and intended for producing abortion. And then it doesn't have to be designed, adapted, and intended, but it's or intended. So any of those, even if it, and clearly the two drugs were designed, they were created for the express purpose of terminating life. And even if they weren't designed only for that, they certainly were adapted for that and have been used. And so under federal law, you cannot use the mail for transmitting those drugs, and it's a federal crime to do so. And there is nothing in state law that can bypass a federal criminal statute because of the notion of federal preemption, which is a fundamental part of the United States Constitution. So that's where we stand. There is certainly an opportunity for the current administration to assert itself very strongly. The president could come out and he could express his strong views on this. And I think if the solicitor, if the entire federal government got behind the idea of ending mail order abortions, I think the Supreme Court would do what they clearly should do under the statutory law. So that's where we stand today. I think as a culture, and it's not just in this country, but the United States is always a leader in these things. As a global culture, we need to shift from decades and decades of anti-fertility legislation designed to suppress childbirth during the prime years of fertility. And we need to encourage early marriages. I've been married for 58 years now, and look forward to hitting the 60-year mark before long. And when I do, my sister and her husband will, at about the same time, reach their 70th wedding anniversary, God willing. Today's young couples are never going to see a 60-year marriage or a 70-year marriage. It's just because the marriages are not going to be as long as they once were. We need to turn that around, and we need to reach a good, stable rate of childbirth. We need to have youth, and we need to have vigor and vitality. You cannot have cultures that are built solely on elderly people. I wish it were not so, but that's the reality of it. So anyway, that's I'll leave you with that thought for tonight. This is something of monumental importance, and it will continue to be of monumental importance, probably for the lifetime of all of you watching. Anyway, I wish you the very best. And next week, we will have Morgan Blythe back with us again. I know everybody will be delighted to see her return. And so we wish you all the best. Join us again for Focus on the News.